It is the early 20th century in England. Lawyer Arthur Kipps is sent to a dreary, isolated village to retrieve and handle the documents of the recently deceased Alice Drablow, who was the owner of Eel Marsh House. Upon Arthur's arrival to the small village, he is immediately treated as an unwanted outsider, as many of the villagers disapprove of his business there, but he doesn't know why. When Arthur finally is able to bribe his way to Eel Marsh House, he quickly discovers that this decrepit house and village are haunted by a specter only known as the Woman in Black, for whenever she is spotted, a child in the village dies. Arthur works tirelessly in the house in Marsh to try to rid the town of this horribly ghostly presence, but will his efforts be worth it in the end? Spoilers ahead for the Woman in Black. You have been warned. Welcome back to Autopsy of a Horror Movie. My name is Brucker, and today I am joined by Megan to talk about the very fun movie from 2012. We are talking about the very spooky The Woman in Black. And Megan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today, especially to discuss a movie that is one of my favorite horror movies, and I don't really say that much. And I love Daniel Radcliffe as an actor, so this is going to be great to discuss today.
Okay, we're already off to a good start. I'm
Yes.
really excited to get into Daniel Radcliffe, this
Yes.
movie, and everything. Well, Megan, thank you for coming on. This is we've been kind of in contacts for like a year,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We kind of met through these. When you're podcasting, you kind of get sucked into these fun little like podcasting
Mhm.
networking group messages,
Mhm.
sort of, and that's kind of how we
Yeah, and
met in there.
Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Instagram. Yeah, and so would you like to tell the folks about your show or any other
Sure.
upcoming projects?
Sure. So, I was a part, and I say this in the past because we actually ended it this past year. Was it's Retrostatic Radio, and it's still up, so people can find it on Apple, Spotify, basically wherever you listen to podcasts, or like we used to call it, a radio show. Because what we did was we re-recorded old radio shows. So from sci-fi ones like X minus one to comedy like Duffy's Tavern or Our Miss Brooks, which originally starred Eve Arden. And for the listeners who might not know who she was the principal from Greece. Um, so she has that
Oh,
very distinct voice. So that was something that she did back in the 50s. We also did some horror episodes that were from suspense. We did a few Dragnet episodes. So it was a lot of fun to do. Unfortunately, AJ, Carrie, and I, who used to work on the show, just work personal life and got really,
mm-hmm.
really intense. So we unfortunately had to end the show. But again, it's still out there. So if anyone wants to listen to it, you can. That's Retrostatic Radio. And we do think that we're going to have some future projects in the very future. Nothing in like the near future, but I just wanted to say that we aren't completely over with maybe another possible podcast or radio show, but I'll just plug what we have out there for now.
And if people are interested, I will include a link in the show notes to like the Apple or Spotify link
Sure,
for the show,
sure. Thank you.
Retrostatic Radio.
Thank you.
So today we are doing a horror review for the movie The Woman in Black from 2012. I this was my first time rewatching this movie since 2012, and
Me
it was
too.
so much fun revisiting this movie. So Megan, I wanted to ask you, on Twitter, I made a post asking for people what were some other horror movies or haunted house movies that people liked, and you replied talking about The Woman in Black,
Hmm.
and that's you and I. That's a message. You say, hey, would you like to
Hmm.
come on and talk about this sometime? Because I actually really do like that movie. What's your history with The Woman in Black?
Sure. So, I had seen the movie, like commercials for it and that, and I didn't see it in theaters actually. I had watched it. It was, let's see, I was around 20. Oh, so it was like the end of 2012. It was my fall semester of my junior year in college. And a
Mm.
guy that lived on my floor in my dorm, he was a huge, like, horror movie buff. I mean, he had like a whole stack of like horror movie DVDs. And I remember being in his room and just kind of searching through, and I saw he had The Woman in Black, and I'm like, I'm like, can I watch this? And he's like, yeah, sure, borrow it. He's like, I don't care. And I was like, okay. But I just was very interested in the movie, first of all, because I had known Daniel Radcliffe through the Harry Potter
Of course,
franchise.
yeah.
So, and so I, liked him from that, but I also, because it had like ended around that time as well, I wanted to see him in a different role. And this is a completely different role. And I'm so glad that I did see him act in this, because that kind of started me to where I'm like, wow, he is really like one of my favorite actors that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've seen him in different movies of his and like TV shows, and it was great to see him in that light. So me being a fan of him, and just the whole movie itself looked interesting, because I like the like Victorian Edwardian aesthetic. So of course, like, to see it as a commercial with like the old home and everything, I was just like, oh, this is my type of movie. So that's what intrigued me with it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this movie it's so good. I remember seeing the trailers for it when this movie actually came out when I was a senior in high school. It was when I was like graduating when
Mm-hmm.
it came out. And I remember the trailers really got me. Of course, Daniel Radcliffe was a big pull for this, and I was starting to get more and more into horror, and I originally kind of started out watching more like ghost stories and ghost hauntings and things like that. And so this genre really kind of grabbed me for that. And I actually got to see this in the theaters. Um,
Wow.
I, I'm such a humbug. I'm such a hermit. I normally don't really go out
Mm-hmm.
that much, let alone to the movie theaters. I know I host a movie podcast, but I just want to stay home. But this was only one of two horror movies I've seen in the theaters,
Mm-hmm.
and my experience was just insane. I took my little cousin with me. By little, I mean he was like 13, I think. So he wanted to go see this, and we went to go see it. And the funny thing was, there was a girl that he knew from his class in the theater with us, and she sat a row in front of us, and she was not having a good time during this movie. She was like just bawling and crying so much through this movie, and this is a very intense
It
movie for
is.
someone that isn't fond of jump scares or
Yeah.
anything super
Yeah.
intense. So yeah, I've always, and when this movie came out onto Redbox back when
Mm-hmm.
people
Mm-hmm.
had to leave their house to go rent movies,
Or
I
have
rented.
DVDs like my friend, he
Yeah,
did. So
yeah,
it was news to
exactly.
me before. Someone mentioned that. They were like, "Oh, no one has DVDs." I'm like what? I was like, I have a DVD player. What are you talking about?
Yeah, sometimes I felt weird this Christmas. I was buying a bunch of Blu-rays for
Yeah,
myself. I was like,
I'm
I
like, it's
want to
like a
like have a little
DVD to me,
collection.
okay? Like, 'cause that's what
Yeah,
someone said. They were like, it's a Blu-ray. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever.
it's a round disc, okay.
Okay.
But yeah, when this came out onto like Redbox, I rented this movie so much that summer when it came out. Like the summer 2012, I rewatched this movie a bunch,
Oh, you're
and this was my
brave.
first.
You're brave. When I watched it alone in my dorm room, now mind you, this was like at 10 a.m. in the morning. I watched it. I hadn't watched it since I watched it this past Sunday, which was 9 years ago. So I
Oh.
have not seen it since then. It scared me the first time. I was like, it did its job. That's it. So you're
Yeah,
brave.
this was my first time rewatching it since then, since
Nice.
2012. So
Okay.
this was,
Got it.
I wanted to get into our discussion of whether or not it holds up and what's still good and effective about it. Before we continue, I want to go. Let me go over the credentials of this movie. So, The Woman in Black came out in 2012. This movie was directed by James Watkins, screenplay by Jane Goldman. And this movie is an adaptation of a novel by Susan Hill, which came out in 1983. This movie stars Daniel Radcliffe, Ciaran Hinds, Janet McTeer, Sophie Stuckey, and Liz White as the Woman in Black. I love that they found somebody whose last name is White to play the woman in black. I find that so funny. This movie had a budget of $17 million. Its opening weekend, it made over $20 million, and worldwide, it made $129 million worldwide. So that's pretty good for, you know, a 90-minute horror movie.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like a huge cast either. You know, there's only like a
Right.
handful of characters in this. This movie was produced by Hammer Film Productions, you know, which made all those awesome classic, you know, Hammer films, those Hammer monster movies, you know, with
I didn't know
the
that.
yeah, so it was
Okay.
so cool that this movie got to be part of that,
Wow.
you know, famous and historic British production company. I think it was their first movie in quite a long time. I think I don't have like the actual like dates on that, but it's their I think it's their highest grossing movie for Hammer.
Wow.
So I just love that it's kind of part of that family and everything, and it was just so awesome to see Daniel Radcliffe
Mhm.
break out
Mhm.
of Harry Potter, because this was a year after Deathly Hallows Part
Right.
2 came out.
Yes, and that's what I loved too. Was like even just watching it again, just a few days ago, was to where I'm like, I even when I saw it back in 2012, I'm like, I didn't even think of him as Harry Potter. He did so well to just be this, you know, young father with a son, like a little boy. Like he went from student in like a wizard world to, you know, a lawyer father, and that with a child and getting haunted, like complete
Yeah.
opposites. And he really did a great job, to where you can tell, to me, is where that's acting. That's great acting right there.
And it's really impressive too, because like a large majority of this movie is just him walking around the house
Yes.
by himself, not saying a word.
Yes, that's true. That is true. There's dialogue, but there is, like, I didn't even think of that until now, where I'm like, yeah, a lot of it is just him walking around the house.
Not even like talking to himself.
Right.
Like he says zero
Yeah.
words like when he's alone.
Yeah.
I love the devoid of dialogue
Hmm.
for those moments, because
It's
it doesn't
intense.
it's intense,
Yes.
right? Exactly. It doesn't break the tension for the audience.
Yes.
And it lets you assume what you think his like inner monologue is, what you
Hmm.
think he's going through, because you can only assume so much from his facial expressions and the actions he's doing, but the whole time you're still kind of like supplanting your own thoughts onto
Right.
him, because he's
Right.
not saying any thoughts.
Right. And you're just like waiting. You're just waiting for
hmm
something to happen.
So let's get into the subgenre categorization of The Woman in Black. So I feel like that there's a lot of things that kind of seem obvious about this movie, but I want to hear from you. What are some subgenres that you think that this movie is sliding into?
Yeah, I think definitely like supernatural, paranormal, ghost type of movie.
hmm
Your haunted house type of movie. I think like a just, you know, that classic haunted house with the, you know, the ghost, or even just the like a cursed village feel too, plays a role in it. So those were kind of my thoughts, with like the curse and the old house that's isolated. Um,
It's so interesting about, I like what you said about the cursed aspect of this,
mhm.
because I agree with you that this movie and this town specifically has this cursed feeling, because it is kind of being plagued by the titular, the woman in
Mhm.
black, but the story does a way of not explaining her, the source of
Right,
her power. She's
right,
not a witch.
right,
She's not this supernatural being. She's just a ghost
right.
of a woman. But how is she? It's interesting, because there is no sort of like, I don't know, ritual or anything to
She's
for
just
her to put
there.
this hex. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's just
it's
there.
true.
It's kind of like this pseudo curse thing.
Mhm.
It's a weird thing. I don't know how to categorize that, but it's very interesting to get
Yeah.
into.
Or it's like
Um,
even like a demon, demonic type of feel,
hmm
you know, that she's just we'll get more into it, like in with just maybe like our thoughts taken away from the movie, but I will say, like, to me she seems more like a demonic type of character that just
mm.
um because of like the anger and stuff in her, is just she just won't leave, and it's just that, like, I don't know. I don't know how else to describe
So
it.
I had this in one of my notes. Does her anger and everything that she's doing on this, does this make this movie count as a revenge story?
That is a good, it could be. And what's funny? I was thinking of this too, where I'm like, this is kind of one of the few horror movies that could be seen as a real story, like based off of a real story. Now, granted, there's like some supernatural aspects where it's like, okay, I don't know, but it could be a real
the whole ghost thing.
Right,
yeah.
right. It's like, where this could have happened where, someone like Daniel Radcliffe's character, he's a lawyer. He has to go to an old home, get their paperwork figured out. There's a ton of paperwork in that old home. I'm just like, where's that come from? And, he has to go there, whatever. But then the other aspect is for her ghosts in that is it could be a true story for where, she was seen as an unfit mother. And her son had to go with her sister and live, that way. And then unfortunately what happened to the son. And then she, of course, the mother gets mad at the sister and, ends up, committing suicide in that. And it's just like, it could be a true story. This could very well be a true story. A stretch, but it could be. And I think that's what is could be scary about it too. That's something I just had thoughts of.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I don't know, because what's presented in the movie. I'm not speaking on Susan Hill's novel because I haven't read it.
Right, I haven't either.
But just what's presented in this movie, the backstory for the woman in black, it's kind of fuzzy. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like the whole time I was going, wait, whose house is this?
Yes.
The whole time.
Yes, that's what I was thinking this time. I'm like, wait, I forgot again. Like, what? Whose house is this? Like, who's the ghost?
Yeah.
And why is she mad? Like, who is? Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, wait. So they took her son away from her. Okay, but did she live in that house? Why couldn't she just give him the birthday cards?
Right.
And I was thinking it was her house because in the pictures of her sister with her husband and her son, you see her in the background in the windows of the house.
Oh my goodness, so creepy.
And it's kind of just like, and yeah, which was very creepy.
Yes.
But I was kind of just going, wait, what?
Yes. And it's like when he is in that scene of where he comes back to the house and he sees her in the window and he goes to the bedroom. It's like, what was that her bedroom? Like, did she stay there? So yeah, I can see where there's a little bit of fuzziness where it's like, did she live there? Did she not? I don't understand.
Yeah. So I will say, so I did a little bit of research. I watched a couple of YouTube videos that kind of provide more context and read the Wikipedia page. So I think in the novel, her son was taken away from her not because she was mentally unfit, but because she had him out of wedlock. She was an unmarried woman.
Okay.
And the town wasn't accepting of that. So they gave the son to her sister who was married. So that was kind of like the backstory, which is a clearer story.
Yeah,
and I think
than the
would
movie.
Have made a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's like, no, let's just make her seem crazy. Let's just
make it creepier or so. Like, I guess.
which like, there's a lot of things about this. Like, they could have probably fleshed this out a little bit more for it to be a little bit more cohesive.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I guess that was something I was thinking about. I was like, is this like a revenge story though? Because the people that she's enacting revenge on makes sense for the novel, like the town, but it doesn't make sense for the movie because it was her sister that took away her son.
Right, and it's like, so why do you keep going after other children? You can stop anytime you want. Just stop, please.
Yeah, I was kind of... I guess that was like a knock I had for this movie. It was like, backstory, whatever. But another subgenre that I felt like this is definitely, I think, gothic horror. That was the full intention, and I really think that they got that so well. It's making me want to explore more gothic horrors, actually. My original thought going into the movie was, oh yeah, this is like a period piece. And I'm watching it, and I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, they have the costumes, they have the architecture and everything, but it doesn't feel like a period piece all the way. Right. And I watched some interviews with the director, and he said that he didn't want this to be a period piece. He basically, what I kind of picked up on was he just wanted the costumes to be accurate and some of the technology to be accurate, but like we're going to let them talk normal. We're going to let them,
Yeah.
we're not going to be like heavy into accents or dialects or anything like that. We're just going to let them talk normal. We're just basically, it's kind of just like a costume of what the audience would think a gothic horror looks like.
That's interesting. That is very interesting. Like, because I said when I was just like, ooh, I like the costumes and everything, but I didn't even think of that. Where it would see if it should have been like a period piece or not.
Let's move on to our fear analysis portion of the show. So there are what I kind of like to use as a baseline for categorizing the types of fear that movies play into. According to Dr. Carl Albrecht, there are 5 types of psychological fears we share as humans, which are the fear of death, mutilation, loss of autonomy, fear of separation, and the fear of humiliation or shame. We could kind of just use that as a baseline, but feel free to branch off of that if you want to. But basically, what kind of fears do you feel like this movie is playing off of, and what about it is scary?
I think there's quite a few in here. So like the fear of ghosts would be one, but I think like just the fear of the unknown, the fear of loss, the fear of losing your loved ones, death, obviously. But I think the huge one in this for me was just the loss of children, especially, and just family members, because a few times they keep mentioning how they, they'll be together again, which in the end kind of plays in the movie, where, everyone will be together, or just even like Daniel Radcliffe's character, where he, during the movie, just has that loss for his wife as well. So those were some of the ones that I had noticed, was just the, fear of like losing people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I had that in my notes about there's definitely like this fear of death, but it's specifically the fear of you losing loved ones specifically. And, that's obviously, from Daniel Radcliffe's character, Arthur, the loss of his wife. And eventually he starts to be fearful for his son, and the townspeople are all fearful for their children. And of course the woman in black, which I did not get her name.
I believe it's so I thought it was like Jeanette, but I think it's Janet. It was one of those. Janet. Like the way that it was spelled, and then when he said it, I'm like, to me, it still looks like it's Jeanette, but I think it's like Janet or something.
Yeah, so Jeanette she also is a character, I feel like, that sort of embodies this this fear of losing your own autonomy.
Yeah.
Because not so much in the decisions that impact, her own person, but she had her, like, her motherhood taken away from her because she was deemed mentally, unfit. And it's kind of this loss of autonomy over, her control over her son, who she should feel some sort of control over, in raising them and taking care of them and loving them and everything. She had that stripped from her. And it's definitely loss of control over, your children, your loved ones, because she had that taken away from her. It seems that that's how she's plaguing this town. And specifically, I felt like a poignant example of that was the daughter that was kind of locked away in the basement.
Yes, that scared me, that scene. Yeah. The first time you saw her, I got creeped out.
Oh, I love it whenever, like, you're looking through the peephole and it's great. Like, oh. But and I love that, like, the scary thing is just it's just a girl. Yeah, it's just a little girl. But her parents are trying they are making the decision to keep her safe down there, and that's them, literally acting on trying to keep her safe from the woman in black. But it's kind of like their decision to shelter her away from the world didn't matter because Daniel Radcliffe, Arthur, saw the woman in black, and by the rules of this movie, if you see her, she comes to town.
He saw her quite a few times, so he did not help them at all. Like,
No.
I can see why they were pretty upset with him.
Yeah. There's also definitely playing into the fear of separation and isolation
Mm-hmm.
too, especially with the Eel Marsh,
Yes.
because it is
Where the
so
road,
separated.
like where the marsh just goes over it in the tide, and it's like I feel that, um, not to interrupt, but
No,
your
no, no,
point
go
with like
please.
the marsh times and that, I feel like it's like a timing type of thing where they're like, well, I'll come to you, but by this, because the tide is like controlling them. Otherwise, you're just gonna be on this complete isolated island, and
Yeah.
that's where I was like, well, that's really creepy.
No, I love it because it really just kind of writes in, you know to be scared when you're on this marsh, to feel a little bit of relief when he gets off
Yes,
of it. And that's like the movie literally gives you breaks whenever
they
he
do.
leaves the
Yeah.
marsh. That you could feel a little sense of like, okay, I could take a deep breath
Yes.
now.
Yes. It's true.
I love how you explain the water going over the road and him being separated from
Hmm.
help.
Yeah.
it
Mhm.
to me it was a very good metaphor for grief,
Mm.
because
Mhm.
he is a person that is grieving the loss of his wife, and of course the Janet or Jeanette, she's also, she was grieving the loss of her son. And I feel like that this marsh kind of really kind of is a good metaphor for grief, because there are times when you feel connected, you feel
Mhm.
okay with everybody, but sometimes there's something that will kind of trigger you, and you kind of fall back into that grief and depression. That's when the water comes over the road and you
True.
feel isolated on there, and you're kind of stuck thinking about your lost ones. And I felt like that was a really good metaphor for exactly what he was going through as a grieving
Yeah.
widow.
Oh, that was a good point. I didn't even think of something like that. Wow, that's a good one right there.
Well, thank you.
That's like an English class type of thing where you could ask the director, so is that what it meant? No, it just went over a tide, but okay, like no.
But it's also kind of like that meme where it's just like it was just a road that flooded.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Like, that's all it
the
was.
curtains are just
Okay,
blue.
yeah, like that's all.
What else did you find scary about this movie?
Yeah, I think definitely like the jump scares. I'm someone who is weak with jump scares. Like, don't get me in those intense moments.
This movie's
Even
plagued with those.
yes, even with like the crow in the beginning, because you really don't see her. I noticed that like she didn't in the opening scene. I didn't even realize that like the opening scene opened like that with the three little girls and her behind, like she's standing there, and I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. But
Yeah.
you don't really see her until, yes, he sees her in like the cemetery area, but like officially until like about 40 minutes into the movie with like the hand in the window, and
Which is just great.
yes, and like it just smacks, and it's like, oh, okay. And like even just seeing her face in the window. But my scariest has to be the rocking chair scene and the nursery. Anything that happens in that
Yes.
nursery, is going to be intense. Like yes, that rocking chair scene, as soon as like I like heard the rocking chair going in there, I'm like, here we go. Okay, here we go. I'm preparing
it's
myself.
so it's so good. Yes, I have to agree. The rocking chair was, well, that jump scare
Yes,
specifically when it's
yes.
rocking and then she's
Shows up.
in the chair.
Hmm.
That was the jump scare that got me the most in this movie.
Yes.
Oh god, it's so I'm not even mad about it, because normally jump scares kind of like tick me off a little bit, but this was just so good. I loved it. And
Hmm.
just the build up, because as he's walking closer to the room, the rocking chair,
Hmm.
it's in the same rhythm as like a beating heart,
Yes.
and it's just so good. I love
And
it.
it doesn't stop when he goes in there. It keeps
That's
going, and
yes.
then all of a sudden, that's when they show her face, and it's like, I wasn't expecting that, but okay. Like, yeah.
It's so good. And that's something that's interesting about this movie, is that it specifically is trying to scare the audience, not so much Arthur.
Yes.
Because there's so many
Yes.
times
He's
where
not
we see
scared.
her, but he doesn't.
That. And he just doesn't really seem fake. Like, even I mean, he walked into a room, the nursery that was locked beforehand, And then he just randomly, okay, now it's open, and here's a rocking chair rocking by itself. And he didn't really even seem fazed by it. And I was just like, I would be out of that house. Like, if I were him, I would not be in that house. But he just kept going back to it. And my one thing I did notice was where his friend that he met, that Mr.
Sam.
Daly, Sam Daly, was where he says, "Don't go chasing shadows, Arthur." And I love that line because it's true. He did end up going to chase her, but it's like it didn't scare him or anything, which I found interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's kind of hard to gauge his own paranoia in the house.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I do like towards the end
Yeah.
of the night, I do feel like he is ready to leave. But just because again, he's not talking to himself. We don't get any sort of inner monologue for
Right.
him. He's just kind of just dealing with this.
Yeah.
And I was I watched this with my girlfriend, and I think it was the night that he stayed there, the first night he stayed there, and it's right after he
I notice
sees.
how you say first night he stays there, because
Yes.
it's like a few nights. So like, okay.
Just bizarre.
Yeah.
And he sees all of the ghosts of the children in the front
Oh
yard,
my goodness.
which was
Those kids,
that
I
was
didn't realize how scary they were again. I'm like, oh my goodness. Anytime they showed up, I was scared.
oh my goodness. Okay, so I don't know if I'm gonna keep this in here, but something really weird just happened. My power just went out. And poor Megan, the look on your face when I just went into complete darkness was priceless. So we had to take a little 15-minute break until my power came back on, but I'm back. That was very creepy talking about this while I was talking about the dead kids coming up to Daniel Radcliffe.
I know, because you like just disappeared, and then your girlfriend came in, and I'm like, okay, they're still around, and then it's like, oh, pitch black, and then I'm like, uh-oh. Am I watching a new Woman in Black right now? No, you should be like, no, we had that all planned for you,
Yes, I took out the power for all of Tuscaloosa.
Yep.
Yeah, I took for my podcast.
So spooky and like just creepy that it happened for this.
Sorry for the abrupt interruption halfway through this show, but I guess I'll go ahead and jump right back into with a question I had about just going over the types of fear that this movie is kind of like tapping into and what it's kind of playing off of. This movie is a very interesting blend between terror and horror. I was having a conversation with somebody about this earlier this week, the difference between the two. And terror is more about the anticipation of you being fearful of something. You think something's about to happen. Nothing's happened, but you are expecting something, or the build-up in anticipation for it. And then horror is the reaction to actually seeing or hearing something that is scary. And so this movie to me felt like the perfect mix of those two things, because so much of this movie is me like on pins and needles just going, oh my god, like what is he about to see, what is he about to find, especially when he's walking through the house, hearing the rocking chair and everything. That's what I loved about this movie, just the blend of terror and horror in this.
That's an interesting like discussion, because I've never even thought of it like what is, because people will either use terror or horror for things, and that's something to think about, because I can see where it is terrorizing because of the sounds, and you just don't know when she's going to show up, or if she's going to show up, or especially like towards the end of the movie when he's like looking down the hallway for her, and you know that she's usually at the end of the hallway, but then at that one point she's not there, and it's like, all right, where is she?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Or just her like lurking behind and stuff, where that is terrorizing, because it's like you don't know what they're gonna, like what she's gonna do, or what's gonna happen next, especially like with the scene of the fire and the little girl, and she's in the corner, the woman in black, and she's just standing there, and it's like, oh no. And then that horror part could be when the daughter goes up in flames. She decides to take the kerosene lamp and just put the flames over her, and that I can see where that would be like the horror part of it, because you're actually seeing it, you're actually living through it at that point, and it's like, okay, no more build up, it happened. So yeah, that's actually a good um thing to bring up, like the terror versus horror.
Yeah, and just so much like suspension too.
Mm-hmm.
I, th-
Yes.
I think because this movie does such a good job at framing their shots, because for like everything we get so much depth of the house when Arthur is walking around, because
Mm-hmm.
we could always see what's behind him. We could always see down
Yeah.
the door behind him into the next room, or the
Mm-hmm.
next room over,
Mm-hmm.
down the hallway, and it adds so much depth to the house. And it's you going, oh my gosh, like she could be like anywhere. She could be in
Right.
that little nook and cranny, or she could be down the hall, or she's in the other room. And I love it when, in watching this now in 2021, after we've gotten so many other types
Mm-hmm.
of ghost stories, this really, did you watch the Netflix series Haunting of Hill House or Haunting of Bly
I
Manor?
didn't know.
This really felt, so the Mike Flanagan made those shows, and this felt like such a Mike
Hmm.
Flanagan thing, because in those shows, so much of what's really scary is that there's like ghosts in the background of the house that the characters don't see,
Mm-hmm.
but you do. So you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're being watched the whole time. And I
Oh,
was really feeling that in this movie. I was like, oh, I just feel like I'm being watched in this house. I
yeah.
don't feel alone. And what is so scary was whenever, what is scary about the woman in black is just like she doesn't walk, she floats,
Yes.
she just glides across, and it's just uncanny. It's like, that's not human, that's not what people do. It just wakes
Right.
you
And
out
her
even more.
scream. She screams all the time. And then they do the up close of her face. And that what terrified me the most, especially like when I first saw it. I had nightmares actually just years after watching the movie. It wasn't even, like I said, I watched it that one time in 2012, didn't have to watch it again. And just even like a few years back, I had some dreams that she was in. And I remember when I saw the back of her in the opening scene, I'm like, that was like the same woman that was in my dreams like twice. I still can remember the two dreams that I had of her, and they were very scary dreams.
Yeesh.
So like that definitely like stuck with me. And the ending does not help that at all either with her face. Like,
Right, yeah.
yeah.
No, this movie does not let you feel like you really escaped, because
No.
there is no escape from her. And
No.
that's something that's very interesting about this movie, is that so like Arthur thinks that he's solved the mystery. He thinks that
Yes.
he's reconciled whatever it was that she wasn't able to, I don't know, have or complete,
Hmm.
in this world. And he brings her the corpse of her son, and he thinks that
Hmm.
will let her go, let her have some peace, but it doesn't
No.
work.
No.
And that's what's really frightening about this, is that there is no solution to it. There is
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
real rhyme or reason. There's no way to stop it, and it's just unrelenting. And it's almost as if she's just on this endless loop, this endless cycle of like,
Hmm.
this is what I'm destined to do now.
It's true. And I feel like from that, going back to even like the fear of, my whole thing is, I think her other thing is her fear is of forgiving,
Oh.
because she just keeps going and going and going. And that's when you think about it, like when you don't forgive people, I know a lot of people are like, well, it doesn't hurt the other person, it hurts you. And in the end, she's like, I know she's hurting like other people, but it's like she just keeps constantly going. And it's like she doesn't want to ever forgive, because that's where I think like the demonic part comes from her, because she just likes to, she feeds off of that, like the revenge and everything, and just
Mm-hmm.
the unforgiving. And it's like that's how you can become if you don't forgive people. And because like at the end where she's just like, never forgive, like it echoes throughout the whole thing, even after you think that it's complete with her son in the nursery, which you definitely can tell, like when she just comes in and screams at him and then like leaves, it's like, okay, that that's not a
Yeah.
complete type of thing. And I think that's what's frustrating too, is that that didn't satisfy her. And like you said, she's just always going to be there, and
Is
there's no end.
I like the point you made that she is unforgiving. She refuses
Hmm.
to to forgive people. Um, does and you're kind of saying that kind of seems a little bit more, I guess, making her like kind of demonic in a way.
Hmm.
So do you feel like her unwillingness to forgive kind of makes her, it kind of dehumanizes her a little bit here, to like it going from just like a kind of like a villain that we can
Hmm.
understand their, I guess, like motivations and
Hmm.
understand their strifes and struggles that they've been through, to just an inhuman monster that just wants to watch the world burn.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously there's part of human in her because it is that emotion of, forgiving and unforgiveness. But I do think there is that devil part of her where it's like she just doesn't stop. Like I mean, even like her screaming is like so demonic type of sounding in that. And like just like you even said, the way that she just glides. She's
Mm-hmm.
not like a I mean, a lot of ghosts in movies usually like are seen as floating in that, but the way that she just like moves around and like swifts, like, very
Mm-hmm.
like a shadow person type of thing where it's like you just see her there and there and it's like, oh, that's no.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
it's like interesting too, because it's like like, you don't hear any footsteps of her. You don't
Yes.
hear her footsteps because it's kind of like that's a very human thing. I'm above that. I
Yeah.
don't leave footsteps. I don't. You don't hear
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. No, it's true. And even just like her not being satisfied with seeing her son, because then it's like, well, do you love your son anymore? Like, did you care
Hmm.
that Arthur, brings your son to you, and it just didn't even matter to her? And
Hmm.
it's like, um, I actually I thought I was just like, well, this is gonna be stupid, but I thought it'd be perfect to get like a picture of Daniel Radcliffe in the nursery scene that night with like the candles around, like not show the bed, but just like the candles around him and be like, when your date like does all this for you and you don't appreciate it or something. Because I was like, that's how I felt, is that he set all that up for her and it just led to nowhere.
Yeah. And it's kind of just like, besides her tragedy is now his tragedy too,
Yeah.
because he wants to be able to solve something. He wants to be able to fix
Yeah.
something, and it just, it it's sad too. Yeah. I don't have anything else to say besides it's just sad.
I
He
know.
can't.
That's the thing too. It's also a sad movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like as I'm watching it, it's scary and it's terrifying in that, but at the same time, there's sadness to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like even I mean, there was a little bit of humor. I wrote this down too with like the Dailies, like Sam Daly and his wife, when he goes Arthur Danny Radcliffe's character goes to dinner at their house and they bring out the boy or the kids and it's these two chihuahuas and it's like I think that added a little bit of sad humor to the movie, kind of, where it's like, oh, here's the chihuahuas, but like it's going off of that, fear of losing people and grieving and everything, because that's how his wife grieved, was getting the two chihuahuas as children, and it's a very it's a movie that plays with you,
Yeah,
like on
definitely.
emotions.
And it's so weird because I feel like it with the dailies, it's kind of also going into that. I guess I don't know if it's like loss of autonomy or just like the fear of the unknown, like what you were talking about earlier, because there's this interesting kind of divide between spiritualism and, I
Mm.
don't know, like, I guess logic. I'll say,
Mhm. Mhm.
because Mr. Daly kind of refuses to believe
Mhm.
in the myth of the
Right.
woman in black and everything. He's just like, and his reasoning for not wanting to accept that is, do you really think I want to go to, like, bed every day thinking that my son died because of some ghost, or just
Mhm.
because life is tragic and life
Right.
happens. So I chose to decide that it, or chose to believe that it was just unfortunate events, not that because some spirit drove him to
Right.
kill himself. So for the message of this movie, I feel like that I have mostly just kind of like prompts of things I feel like this movie kind of makes you think about, but doesn't really give an answer to anything really.
Mhm.
I wish that this movie kind of fleshed out some more themes a little bit that I was kind
Mhm.
of picking up on. Something that I thought that was really interesting was that So there was kind of that debate about between logic, reasoning, and like spiritualism, the supernatural, but
Mhm.
we don't get a whole lot of debate about that in this movie. It's just kind of a couple lines from Mr. Daly.
Mhm.
So I kind of wish we had maybe a character struggling with that more, like maybe
Mhm.
Arthur struggling with that more, not accepting that, a spirit could be haunting this house or
Mhm.
anything. Um, but something that I really, really, really wish that this movie got more into was I was getting a real sense that there was this divide between social and economic classes in this movie
Mm.
because the Dailies were obviously very wealthy. They're the wealthiest
Mhm.
family in this village, and they're the only ones with a car. They're the only ones with a phone. They
True.
have a very luxurious house.
That's true.
So, and he was rejecting though what the lay people, the common people, were
Mhm.
saying about, hey, this house is haunted. We need to leave it alone. He's up there in his nice mansion. He's just like, no, that's just a
Mhm.
bunch of superstition. You don't need to worry about it. But I feel like that there wasn't any sort of real resolution between the classes of that. So I
Yeah.
kind of wish we got more into that.
No, I see that too. And just even going off of the superstition part is where I think it also shows how superstition controls people's lives. Where clearly it didn't control his life, but to the people who, were in the like the lower classes and that, I mean, even the ones that locked their daughter in the basement, like
Yeah.
that's how extreme the superstition was. And even them trying to stop Arthur from going to the house, doing his job, um, I feel that it can, it I don't, superstition can definitely have a control, whether that's something maybe good that you think
Hmm.
you're protecting someone, or maybe it's bad because it's like, well, you're letting it get to you to live your life basically.
I feel like that we're also getting a moral of why it's important to confront problems
Mm.
and confront any sort of
Mhm.
issues you're having because I feel like the townspeople themselves kind of exemplify that because they know that the marsh is haunted and they know that people going there puts their children at risk, but
Mm.
for some reason they don't tell Arthur about it.
Yeah.
Like they're all just very unwelcoming and just not
Yes.
warm and just like move, leave. But nobody like explains to him why he shouldn't
Mhm.
go there. And I
Mhm.
didn't know why. I didn't know if that was like a thing of them just like I just didn't get why people wouldn't tell him that. So that's another
Yeah.
thing I felt like could have fleshed this out more.
Yeah, because I thought the when I think when the fire happened and then he goes back to the tavern and the wife, um, like they're having the drink together. I thought she was going to explain to him what was going on basically. But yeah, you're right. Like nobody had the decency to just communicate with him and be like, "Hey, don't go there. This is what's been going on." It's like they just kind of want to keep it, where they don't even want to talk about it because they feel
Yeah.
that, they'll have her come around. And I find it interesting too how I think even going back to where like she's not maybe human or something, but like the superstition is where she she goes from the mansion, house, manor, whatever you want to call it, and which is isolated on this island, and ends up in the village. And that to me is just so like where I can see maybe why the villagers are so scared because she does show up there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so funny, like how you said, where there's like, no ritual, there's no incantation or something for her. She's just there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can see from their point of view, like maybe they don't want to like talk about her or anything because they know that she'll just lurk there.
I think I'll
I
just
guess.
summon her like Beetlejuice or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I just so it's just like them not addressing it even with him. Like they're kind of just living with it,
Yeah,
but not talking about it. It's like
yeah.
it's kind of like those I don't know, like there's like dirty family secrets you have, where like
Yes.
everybody just dances around the subject, but nobody actually addresses it.
Yeah, yeah. Or like even Arthur, I guess, could be where he's not solving the problem with his son, where his son is just he's upset, that his dad's working all the time, and he's trying to show through his little pictures, but Arthur, I mean, he understands, but I feel that that's another thing too, where maybe like running away from the problem when he goes to the house, but I don't know, something I thought of.
That's something interesting. Yeah, kind of like running away from him, staying at the house, because I always wonder, why doesn't he just take the paperwork and go work somewhere
Exactly.
else?
Yes. Well, there was a lot of paperwork, so I guess
Yes.
like
I don't know. That's another thing. I don't really get his
understand.
job here. Like,
Me either. I was the same way.
I was kind of just like, I get, like, it was just paperwork. That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
That's all he's doing
Yeah.
is he's checking the books.
It's like what was he specifically trying to find? And that's the thing that you never kind of, I don't know, I didn't get that. Like I didn't understand what he was really trying to find in the house. Like
Yeah, I just like getting their affairs in order. Like, to me, I was like, I guess he just needs the deed and the death certificates.
Maybe.
But
yeah,
I don't know. Anyways, I was like, I don't know what these birthday cards are helping you with, man.
I know. He's just getting nosy and stuff like that.
I feel like there's some.
He's just getting in their business.
I feel like there's some lawyer listening, going, "Oh my god, there's so much paperwork for that stuff."
I know.
Like...
There's paperwork, but and you know, if you want to go into that too, you could say where like he's kind of like the woman in black, because he's trying to look for this paperwork and everything, but you don't know what he's exactly looking for, just like you don't know what she's exactly looking for in the end, because him bringing the son to her just never satisfies her. I don't know. Just thought of that right now. But yeah, there's just so much paperwork in that house. That's all I kept. I'm like, there's so much paperwork in like the bedrooms and the parlor, wherever.
Yeah, I didn't exactly get his, like, again,
job. Yeah,
the premise. I mean, I understand the premise. He's there to kind of get the affairs in order so that way they can sell the house. I don't know. Anyways, I don't want to spend too much time talking about
I know.
the logistics of a 1906 lawyer.
Yes.
So it's also obviously a lot about grief and how it looks different for different people. I thought it was really shocking and kind of just a kind of punch to the gut when we open up on Arthur shaving, and you see for a moment he holds the blade on his neck, and you just see for just like the quickest moment he thinks about ending his life, for just like the quickest moment. And that was just like, whoa, this movie is really heavy in, I guess like mental health. And
it's interesting you actually even pointed that out, because I kind of didn't even really pay attention to that. Like I just saw him do, and I'm like, okay, he's pausing, but that's actually really good to point out now that I'm thinking of the scene.
Yeah, it's really it was kind of like I don't know, kind of like just a punch to the gut for me. I was like, oh man, he is, struggling through something. And and that's why I kind of felt like what you were kind of explaining earlier, that this sort of mission he's given himself of figuring out the mystery of this is just kind of like his little sort of escape, kind of. That's why he's just rifling. I mean, obviously it's for his job, but I feel like he's going a little bit above and beyond. Maybe he's not. I don't know. But it just really feels like he was there just because it was something to really get his mind off of things. And maybe he didn't believe in ghosts, and that's why he wasn't scared of it. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because they also show when he's on the train, he's looking at the newspaper with like the spiritualism ad, which was big, like that was huge back then. And
like doing the seances,
right? And it's just interesting how like, and then at the end when he brings the son to the nursery, he's kind of doing his own little like seance thing. This could be saved for the end for like a rabbit hole type of thing, but it's so interesting. I don't know why I thought of it during the whole movie, where I'm like, was Dan Radcliffe character, like, was Arthur trying to find his wife in the house? Like, did he think of the ghost as like his wife, but just in a different form? I don't know. Like, it just still, I guess maybe weirds me out, or that he wasn't as scared as like we would be. I don't know.
It's interesting because I think I talked about earlier. It's like it seemed like the movie was more trying to scare the audience, which seems kind of like obvious, but I feel like we didn't see him have many fearful reactions throughout the movie. I mean, like he had some, but a lot of the scares were things that he didn't even notice that we saw. And I don't know, I find that very I don't know if clever is a good word for that, but I just find that interesting. Before we close out, I'm going to steal a question from my old show, but would you? And there is a sequel to this movie, but
Yes,
let's
yeah,
pretend it doesn't exist.
yeah.
Would you like to see a sequel to this, or do you think that there should be a sequel, or anything that
Mhm.
you would? What would you like to see in a sequel?
Sure. So I definitely will say a no. I definitely think there should not have been a sequel to this. I did not see it, but I did want to tell people they can watch it on YouTube. I saw it for free. So if you want to watch it, the second Woman in Black, it is up there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they just uploaded it like I think last month or something. But I was looking for the trailer for it just because I wanted to see what the sequel was. And I mean, they seem like they did a good job with using the same house and the premise of it and that. But to me, I feel like this movie specifically, The Woman in Black, just should have ended. Like that's it. You know that she's gonna keep going, and I think that what makes it creepier and like is just she's just gonna keep going and that's it. I'm not a big like sequel person either. There's
Mm-hmm.
very, very few movies that I do like a second movie to. But I with this one I would not have chosen to do a second movie.
I would say kind of no. Well,
Hmm.
let me take that back. I will say yes to a sequel, but kind of with an asterisk. I don't want like a Woman in Black 2, even though I've seen the sequel and I remember not hating it, but that's when
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I like really knew how to like appreciate movies back then. So maybe if I were to
Yeah.
rewatch it now, I might go, "Oh, this is bad." But I would love to see a Mike Flanagan Netflix series, just The Haunting
Mm.
of Eel Marsh. I would,
Like a series of it would be
yes,
kind of cool.
I
That
would
would
love
be
to see
cool.
that same style as what we've gotten
Sure, that
from
would be cool.
Haunting of
If
Hill
I
House.
mean, I
Yeah,
know Daniel Radcliffe technically couldn't be in it, but if he
right.
could be in it again, all right, maybe I'll
You're just like
consider
run
it.
them
But
back.
we'll just run him back. We'll just pretend like what happened at the end didn't happen, and like, or hey, he could join the Woman in Black. They could,
He's haunting that
they
train
could, they could
station.
be.
Oh man, yeah, no, I would love to see kind of like a Mike Flanagan Netflix
I could see,
series
yeah,
of this.
yeah.
Well, Megan, thank you so much for coming on. This was so much fun. Were any other closing thoughts about this movie before we hop off?
No, I think the only thing I wanted to bring up was like at the very, very end,
Oh,
was
please.
kind of like my theory or something. Maybe
Yeah.
like we said before, like before we recorded our tinfoil hat type of thing,
Oh
where
yes, lay it on me.
um it's like so the scene where they're in the train station and spoiler alert for everyone, Daniel Radcliffe and his son end up getting killed by a train because the Woman in Black shows up at the train station. So I thought of the nanny. So there's like two tinfoil hat things. So this is my first one where the nanny, they show like the back of her and she's all in black. And all I remembered was from Sam Daly's room was when his son was painted at the beach and there was that nanny
Mm.
in the black. I don't know. Like I don't know if that like symbolized anything just because the nanny's back was turned and she just didn't even turn around to like look for the child. His son just went out on the track. I mean, yeah, she was buying tickets, but I don't know if that had to symbolize anything. Maybe I read into that too
Oh,
much, but
interesting.
it was something I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then my second thing was at the end where, um, you know, Arthur and his son and his wife do join together. So it's a twist, bittersweet ending. That's how I kind of like
Mm-hmm.
to describe it. To where it's like, they're now all a family, unfortunately, in the circumstances. But, and then at the end, when they like pan up to the Woman in Black, all I thought was she kind of did them like a morbid favor where it's like she brought a family together that she knew that she couldn't have. So I felt like she was kind of maybe showing her appreciation to Arthur, that yes, he brought her son back to her, even though it was like his corpse. And like he made that attempt. Like he never tried to cast her out of the house or anything. He just kind of left her where she was. Like he never tried to chase her away or anything. So I don't know if maybe she sensed that or something. So it's kind of like, well, here you go. You can be with your family. I don't know. That is definitely my tinfoil rabbit hole
I think
thing.
that she just wanted to get the kill count up. I think that she
And that's
just
true.
I
That
think
could be
she's
true too.
I think she's just bloodthirsty.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the point that you made though about I'm going to jump off of your tinfoil hat and add to
Sure.
it with the nanny being dressed in black as well. I'm kind of going to draw a connection here to the Final Destination franchise in that the black is code for our antagonist in this movie,
Right.
and so she's able to manipulate the nanny somehow to not pay attention to the boy, because she could tell the boy to run onto the tracks, but the nanny's going to get him and stop him.
True.
So I guess wherever we kind of see people donning black, it's that symbolizes the woman in black of people or things that she's able to manipulate for her sick designs of child death.
and hey, I'm not saying with my other one that she was, warm and fuzzy in that. That was just my thought where I'm like, well, she technically kind of gave them what they wanted. But, and then of course at the end, it's like they have to show all the kids and stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's why there shouldn't be a sequel. No more for you.
Yeah.
No more for her to destroy people.
Oh goodness! Well, thank you, Megan, for sharing that. Thank you again for coming on. Would you please remind people about Retrostatic Radio and where all they can find it?
Sure. Yeah. So Retrostatic Radio, we are off of Anchor.fm. So if you do go to Anchor, you can find the other places where you can listen to us, like Stitcher, Breaker, Apple, Spotify, all those main places where you can listen to the podcast. So if again, we are not doing anything anymore with Retrostatic Radio. There's no social media or anything, but if you do want to just check out the show and listen to it, we had a lot of fun doing it last year. So if you want to listen to some old time radio shows reenacted in 2020 style, we have sound effects and stuff.
Oh yeah, it's a good production. I love it. Yeah,
we put a lot of heart into it, so I hope people do check it out and enjoy it.
Megan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode on The Woman in Black. I just want to give 2 quick shout outs because this show is new to me and new to people, but the feedback has just been overwhelmingly nice and positive. So I just kind of want to say thank you, everybody that's reached out and said something really nice. Megan, you were saying some very nice things before we started, which I really appreciate.
Thank you.
I want to give a special thank you to Brent of the Uncultured Opinions podcast and I'm sorry, I don't know your name. We just kind of just been talking on Instagram, but the Tales of Point Horror Book Club, or Tales Point Horror Book Club, which is the handle of Instagram that you can find them at. You guys have been super nice in reaching out and messaging me saying super nice things about the show, so it really means a lot.
It was a lot of fun discussing this. I have never ever had this discussion with someone. Thank you for letting me join you on this show and talking to the public about it.
Absolutely. It's so much fun just to get down and kind of just geek out over some horror movies and people. I would love to continue the dialogue, so please follow me on Instagram at bruckerhorror, and you can see my new episode posts for every episode and comment below your thoughts and opinions and everything, and I would love to continue the dialogue with you there. So, Megan, again, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you for listening to this episode. Please share it with a friend, rate, review on iTunes, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.